Hi, Antonis here. Did you know that you can use native Android libraries in your .NET MAUI applications? Yes, libraries which are written not for .NET but for JVM using Java or Kotlin. You can still take advantage of them through a mechanism called bindings. Please don't confuse them with data bindings, which you use in your XAML files to communicate with view models. Those are completely different things. Today we will create a small example comprising of three projects: a native Android library, a binding library which communicates with that Android library, and a simple .NET MAUI application. At the end of this video you will have a small playground working end-to-end, which you continue exploring in your own time. Let's dive in. Normally you don't need to create Android library yourself. It's provided to you in the form of jar or AAR file, which you need to bind and use in your .NET MAUI application. But we will go an extra mile and create a small library ourselves. So let's run Android Studio and create a new project. We don't need an activity. So we will put this project in this folder and we will call it My Math Native. Alright, let's wait for a second for Gradle to finish its job. And now we want to add another module called AreaLib. This is our library, which is, we don't need phone or tablet. Nice, we agree to everything. And now let's switch back the view. And in this folder we'll create our class, which we will call Area Calculator. And this class will have just one simple function. Calculate rectangular area. It will accept two parameters. Let's say integers, and it will return an integer. Alright. Our function is ready. Let's build it. To find the artifact, we will switch back to the project view and go into our AreaLib module, build, outputs, AAR, and here is our file. Let's make sure that our class and our function is in that AAR file. For that, we need to use a decompiler. I use JD-GUI. So if you work with bindings too, you definitely need a decompiler. Please do your research and install the one you like. So I'll just grab the file, and here inside classes.jar I see my area calculator class with a function called calculate rectangular area. That's all good. So the first step is ready. The next step would be create a binding library. Let's run Rider to create a .NET solution. We need to select MAUI project, and that's gonna be an Android target platform of type library binding. We will call our solution My Math Native Binding and click Create. Now we have a project which was generated, and it has two folders: additions and transforms. They are used for customizations, which are required for complex cases when you need to rename some classes, rename some methods, or let's say drop some functionality which you don't need in your application. So those files and folders, they are outside of the scope of today's video. We will touch metadata.xml at the end of this video, but it's going to be a simple case. So to create a binding, we just need to copy our AAR file to this project, and all the heavy lifting will be done by the binding framework. Let's open Android Studio, copy our AAR file and paste it in here. We need to make sure that it has the right build action. It should be Android library for both jar files and AAR files. Despite the fact that you have Android AAR library build action, you don't select it. You select Android library. And the last step, we need to check the target framework. At that moment, you need to check documentation of the library you are binding, because if it uses native Android APIs, you need to target the same API, Android API here. In our case, the library is very simple, so we don't use any native Android APIs, and that's why we don't care. We just use the latest one. On my machine, it's API 33. Let's switch to the release mode and build our solution. The output file is in the bin folder. Yep, here it is. My math native binding.dll. We will use this file in our .NET MAUI application. I'll create a simple mobile app. It's gonna be .NET MAUI app, and I will call it My Math. The first thing I'm gonna do is to import the dependency. You can distribute your Android bindings in different ways. For example, you can pack it as a NuGet package, or you can reference it as a DLL. So this is what I will do. So I go to my math native binding, bin release folder, and this is my DLL. Now I can see that it's here, but it was also imported for iOS and Mac. So let's fix it. I don't need Mac for this example, and Windows, and I need this condition. Alright, let's save it, and you see that it's gone from iOS. The reference stays only for the Android project. Now let's build it. Aha, we have an error, and it says that we can't downgrade the API level. So we have this error because our Android library has minimum SDK set to API 24, and our MAUI project has minimum SDK set to API level 21. You see, it can be seen right here. Yeah, minimum SDK is 24, but our MAUI project targets API 21. Yeah, to fix it, we just need to update our minimum SDK. Let's build again. Awesome, our project builds. Now we need to use our library. It's a native Android code, so for that we need either use conditional compilation or we can use partial classes. So we will go with the latter. For that we will create a folder called services and create a class called math service. Right, it's gonna be a partial class and it will have a partial method. Nice. And now we need to implement this method on both platforms. Very important that those classes, they have the same namespaces. So I'll just copy it. And I need to do the same for iOS. Obviously, we don't have a binding library for iOS at that moment, but we need to find an alternative. For now, we'll just return 0, I guess. Yep. Right. In here we will create our calculator. So IntelliSense helps us. And we have our method right here, calculate rectangular area. And we pass our parameters to it. And we return the value. So we still have an error here. Let's try to build it and see what is this error. Yeah, this is because our partial class for iOS doesn't have the same namespace, so we need to update it. And there we go. Let's try to build it again. Alright, the build is successful. Now we need to register this service and inject it on our page. So for that we'll go to MAUI program.cs. And we'll use it on our main page. Okay, now let's say when the counter is odd, we will set text to area is 0, sorry, when the counter is even, and when the counter is odd, we'll calculate our area based on past parameters. So area is, we call math service, calculate area, let's say 10 and 5. All right, let's build it. And let's click a couple of times. So yep, and you can see that our native Android library is called, and it multiplies 10 by 5. Now we have a simple application working end-to-end. Let's play with it a bit. What should we do if the library we are binding has a dependency on another library? Let's emulate this scenario and see what we should do in this case. I'll open Android Studio and add a new module. So I'll switch to the project view and new module, and I'll call it operations lib. And this module will have just one class and one function which multiplies two numbers. Let's create a class called math operations and the function called multiply. And now I want to use this function in my area calculator. So I create an instance of this object. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, we can include that module. And now we need to import this class. And instead of just multiplying two numbers, we will call a function. Multiply. And let's build it. Now we need to go through the entire process again. We need to copy a file to our binding project, build it, and then build our MAUI app. So let's do it. And you know what? While I remember, let's also add one more method to our area lib module. We will need it in the future. So in our area calculator, I'll create a function called calculate, circle area, but instead of doubles, I'll just use, and it will accept, that's fine, let's leave it as doubles, and we just multiply pi by square of radius. Let's build it again. Okay, and now we need to copy our area library to our binding project. Copy, and we remove this one, paste. Now let's make sure that this area file has our new methods. Area calculator, and we have calculate circle area and rectangular area. Now we need to rebuild it. Okay, we have an error. Let's run .NET Restore and build it again. Okay, and in our MAUI project we now should be able to see those new methods. So if we remove this one and open it again, yeah, now we have two methods to call. Let's run it. And what do you think will happen when I click on the button, take into account that now we have a dependency on another library? And let's click. And if you thought that it's gonna be a runtime exception, you were right. This is because the dependency wasn't bound. So when a library which we are bounding has a dependency, we need to also include those dependencies in our binding project. Let's do it and fix this problem. Now I just need to go to Android Studio, find the AAR file, copy it, and go back to the binding project and insert it here. This is all I need to do. Now I just rebuild this project. Go back to my MAUI application and run it again. Alright, let's click again. Now you see that it's working because the binding framework bound the dependency too. And now I can use methods from the second library in my .NET MAUI project too. For example, I can create an instance of math operations, and you see that I imported operations lib. What if you don't want to expose API from this library in your project? You still can do it, and for that you need to tweak your binding library. Let's switch to it, and now we need to update our CS proj. In here we need to add an item group which would update our binding and say that you still keep this reference, but you don't generate bindings for it. So we say here Android library, update, and we specify the name of the library which we want to update, including the file extension, and we say bind equals false. So now bindings won't be generated for this library, but the app will still work and won't crash at runtime. Let's see. I do clean and rebuild. And switch back to our MAUI project. You see that now I can't use those methods. They are gone, they weren't generated, and our app is still working. We avoided runtime exception which we had before. So that's very convenient. And one last thing I wanted to show you today is what if we have a library which exposes too many methods. So I don't want to expose all of them to my .NET MAUI application. You also can do it in your binding project. For that you need the metadata XML file. So let's switch to our binding project, and right here we can write XPath code which would remove certain methods or classes from our binding. So let's write remove node, and we specify the path which is there. So it's gonna be API. We have a nice comment in here, package name, and now we need to know the package name. So for that we go to Android manifest, and we just copy it from here, but that's operations library. Let's hide that method which I've just created, which calculates area of a circle. So it's in area lib. We copy it in here. So the class is called area calculator. And the method is called calculate circle area. The case is important here, so be careful. Alright, so you saw that while I was typing I didn't have any IntelliSense, and that's what makes writing bindings difficult, that it's very easy to make a mistake. Now I'll show you how you can debug it. So as you know, XPath, that's some kind of a language which allows you to query XML. So you might be wondering, okay, but what kind of XML are we querying? From what XML are we removing a node? And that's a good question. So let's go to our OBJ folder here in binding. We go to release, and in here we have a file called api.xml. Inside it we see a description of all methods which will be generated. So you can see our class right here, which is called area calculator, and we see a constructor, a method which is called calculate circle area, and a method called calculate rectangular area. So that XPath expression would remove this node from this file. There are online tools which allow you to debug XPath, and I have one of those open right here. Let me get it on this screen. So I'll paste our XML here on the left hand side, and in here I'll paste our XPath expression. So I need to copy only this part, and if my expression is correct, then a certain node in the XML file will be highlighted, and you see it was highlighted. It means that it will be removed when I compile the binding. But what if we just change the name of the method slightly? Let's say we make it capital. You see now our expression won't be applied to any node. So you can use such online tools for debugging. This is very convenient. Let's build our binding, and see what we have in our .NET MAUI application. So I clean it, rebuild, and now switch back. If I try to call a method on calculator, you see that it only has calculate rectangular area. Method which calculates area for a circle was removed. We are wrapping up, but before you go, let me give you some advice which I wish someone gave me when I was exploring this topic. First of all, always move in small steps. You make a change, make sure your binding builds, make sure your project builds, it doesn't crash at runtime. So moving in small steps allows you to spot problems sooner and fix them straight away. Second one, always clean and rebuild. When you update your binding project and then when you use your library in your .NET MAUI project, clean and rebuild, because sometimes something is not updated. You think that you are working with the new version of the library, but in fact you're working with the old one and you can't understand why it's not working, so on and so forth. So just be diligent, clean, rebuild, and you're good to go. And the last one, learn tooling and read documentation. So be comfortable with things like Assembly Explorer in .NET or Java decompilers. Those things, they are very convenient and very useful when it comes to debugging. There is lots of documentation on Android bindings for Xamarin, so you definitely want to check it out. I'll leave some articles and videos which I found useful in the description to this video. This is all for today, so I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.